Hello there, you know me by now, it's Peter Wood. And you've seen many of my films on here, or parts of my films even, and there are over 300 here. But what I want to show on this film is the diversity of the full films themselves, just so you know what is available. All the stuff on here is free. But I do have other full films that I want to talk about here, just so you know what is available to you. For instance, let's go into the different sections that I work on. My films are basically in three areas. The first one are the travel films, the exploring films, where I go and look around different countries and I look at the cultures, the foods, the drinks, the lifestyle, the pretty places to see, and in between I paint in those and try and show you ways of painting archetype scenes with travelling materials such as pastels or watercolours and acrylics, or occasionally oils depending where I am. Then there are the thematic films, ones where I choose a particular theme such as towns and country, or choosing the right medium and technique and material for the subject. Here are a few of those different films just to give you an idea of what's available. Now I think these are great because they're very diverse, and if you want to look at very different ways of painting and just get inspiration, then these films are lovely in that way that they'll look at lots of different subject matters, whether it be horses or birds, landscapes, seascapes, beaches, whatever, and they'll look at different ways of painting those, different ways of approaching them. Well, as you see from the range of subject matters in the gallery I have here, they're quite broad. Although I may be using different techniques and methods in many cases, the style will be very similar. But in this film, the thing I want to do most of all is talk about different ways and different techniques and methods we can use that are best suited to those particular subject matters. So for painting flowers, it might be watercolour or it might be acrylic inks. For painting landscape, it could be oils or seascapes or whatever. We have to choose the medium to suit best the picture we're doing. Now we can paint almost any subject matter in any medium, but some are better suited, I think. And this is what this film is about. This film is to show you some different ways of using those different mediums that will make life easier, or be more suitable, or will be more effective for those particular subject matters that you've chosen. Let's do that. Let's deliberately paint some very different types of subject matter. Let's paint some trees with very thin branches against the light. Let's paint trees in autumn. Let's paint trees in the summer. Let's paint reflections in water. Let's paint figures in children. Let's paint some animals. Let's paint many different subjects and see the best effects we can get with those different mediums, shall we? And you do need to have some technical expertise. You do need to know about colour, you do need to know about colour intensity, about the colour circle, about tones. You need to know about the opposites of the colour circle and so on. Here you can see charts showing you just how those colour circles work, and also how the tones work. When you see a very bright colour, that's colour intensity. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the same tone. The yellow, for instance, here looks quite bright. But when you see it as a tone, it's a dull grey. Tones and colour intensity are two totally different things. Complementary colour is also very important. Then we'll look at all the different materials and paints. We'll look at acrylics. We'll look at the different ways of painting, how we can paint light over darks, how we can paint thick over thin. Here you see an example of painting onto dark. We'll look at the various brushes for the various materials as well, different brushes for oil painting. As you see here, the flats and the rounds, the long-handled nylons I prefer to use. We'll look at painting knives and the difference between painting knives and palette knives. They're completely different. We'll use sponges and texturing, not only in watercolour but with oil painting as well. And the peripherals to our painting, palettes and different ways of using those palettes, different materials for the palettes. This is an old traditional wooden palette, but it might be that you just use, as I do, 2 pieces of perspex, quite adequate, as you see here. We'll look at the colours that you might wish to choose to stock up your palette with. And how you might wish to carry those paints about. It might be in a plastic bag, it might be a nice neat case. In my case I use an old wooden case like this, nice and hardy. And then when you finish your painting with different types of varnish, I would advise normally a retouching varnish rather than a mastic varnish. You can get all sorts of different varnishes from matte to glossy. The acrylic inks are very, very useful. We'll show how they're used. Pastels, soft pastels. I won't go into oil pastels in this particular film, but I will talk about soft pastels such as the unisons. We'll be using the unison pastels and the inscribed pastels. And you can see the wonderful range of colours that they have. These are the inscribes, which are cheaper and they're also a bit harder, but they do give you some very, very bright, garish colours that you can't get in the more expensive unisons, and they can be quite useful for flower painting, for instance. How you store your pastels is up to you. You may wish to put them into a nice neat box or have them in the box they come in. Then we'll look at watercolours. Here is the palette of watercolours that I keep in. Now I'll show you in more detail. Again, with these basic colours you'll be able to paint almost anything. Of course you can add more colours to your palette, and if you see something interesting and unusual, try it out, why not? Different artists all have their different favourites. And again, we should be using the FW acrylic inks with watercolour as well, because they are water-based. Once they're dry like acrylic, they're waterproof. This can be very much to your advantage as well. And then there are the things that we can add to watercolours, like the acrylic medium, for instance, which will make it more glossy, or the Pabio drawing gum, which is a masking fluid, very, very useful. Watercolour pencils, a must for those wanting to do finer illustrations or botanical work. Then there are the brushes you might use. Obviously you can have hundreds and thousands of brushes. Here's my wallet of brushes, and I have everything there that I need to use from almost every subject. The swords, the flats, the rounds, the filberts. About 3 or 4 of each size is quite adequate. How you put your paintings together, you may wish to use photographs. Here's an example of how you might put photographs together and composite them. Compose different compositions with those photographs, chopping them up or using them on the computer. And finally we come to where we're going to paint and how we're going to paint comfortably. It might be you have different easels. Here I'm using an easel and a little camping stool, quite adequate for painting in Norway there. You can see I have my box of watercolour paints beside me, and I can reach everything I require. Or you might just lean the board on your knee, as needs must in this case when I'm painting out at Burton Agnes Hall. A sketching easel is very, very useful. It might be a metal one or a wooden one. I prefer the wooden ones because they're lighter and they feel nicer for me. Again, you see the sketching easel here. All sorts of wonderful situations you'll be painting in, but do make sure you're portable, do make sure you're comfortable. So a little camping stool is very handy to put over your shoulder. If you're closer to the car, of course you can take a deck chair with you. A big studio easel is needed if you're going to handle larger canvases or there's a lot of wind. I've even tied my sketching easel down and put camping pegs in as for a tent to hold an easel down in stronger wind. Here we are in Switzerland, and what wonderful places we can get to paint, whether it be in the mountains, whether it be in a valley, or whether it be looking over the sea. And then there's a series of foundations. Now these are interesting, and this is one reason I've just made this film, is because I want to show you the updated versions. There are now a whole updated version of the foundation series in pastels, in watercolours, in oils, and now in acrylics as well. The watercolours aren't just one film. Remember that my films are, each disc is 3 hours long, and most are double discs. I charge £10 a disc. And you'll find most companies are charging £30 for half an hour. I'm just charging £10 for a whole 3 hours. And then with the double disc, £20, 6 hours of filming. So for instance, we have volumes 1, 2 and 3 in watercolour. So you've got 18 hours of film there. Tremendous amount of work, taking you right through the different techniques, paintings, methods, ways, places, giving you lots and lots of ideas for both the beginner and the advanced, right the way through. The same with pastels, the same with oil painting. We look at all the various techniques and methods that we can use, and I give you demonstrations and examples of these in all of the films. The first set of the films usually goes into great detail on the foundation series, with all the methods and techniques, brushes, tools, everything, and tells you what you need to buy, even how to keep the paints. Little tips all the way through. Each different painting will approach a new problem, and hopefully you'll enjoy seeing these painted at the tip of the brush all the way through, whether it be on plein air, out in the countryside, in reality, in Florida, just after a thunderstorm, or in the Outer Hebrides during a rainstorm. I'm actually working, getting soaked in the rain, or whether it be in my country gardens here in Lincolnshire, in France or wherever. So great diversity of films at very low prices. So I want to just show you now the whole series of the covers, so you know just what is available. And then if you want to go to, if you wish to go to Art Angling Breaks, which is my second website, we've got peterwoodarts.com, which is my main one, but Art Angling Breaks is the commercial side, but Art Angling Breaks has all of the lists of DVDs, the covers and what's on them. All of my DVDs are menued within the DVD. Most of them have the titles on the cover. If not, there's a little slip of paper that goes inside. And each DVD is menued within the film itself, so that when you go to the beginning of the film, you can choose which section to go to. This means you don't have to run right through the whole film to find the part you were last at. You can go to that individual section as you wish. So we've got foundations in pottery, double discs. We've got foundation in acrylics, pastels, oils and watercolours. Then we've got the thematic series, and then we've got the travel series. And of course you've got all my little tidbits and freebies here to see as well. So if you want to get the whole films, then by all means go to my website, Art Angling Breaks, and take a look at these and then order directly through me. They come in both PAL, PAL and NTSC, so they can be seen in Europe or in America or New Zealand or wherever. You choose that when you order with me. Now, having discussed these sections, let me just show you a few snippets of each of them, just to give you an idea of the diversity and what will be covered. For instance, my foundation in colour and drawing, which is the very basics of the series. It goes into perspective, portraits, everything you can want, from the very basics of starting your art for the very beginner. Before you can take the main videos on, it's a good one to have. And it comes free if you order more than 2 videos anyway. But it's only £10 for the 3 hours or so that's there, of all of this detail and graphics that I put into it. To keep these films as natural as possible, and to keep the cost down as well, and when I'm filming on plein air, we don't have lots of fancy equipment, we don't have radio mics and everything, so there will be a bit of breeze with the microphone in places, and I have to deal with the flies and things as they actually are out there. This is not an artificial situation. I'm painting as an artist in reality, so don't expect BBC perfection. But having said that, for the price you're getting, a mere £10 for 3 hours, and for the amount of information and actually working out there or in the studio with the artist all the time, I don't think you'll have a problem with it. I think you'll find that I give you more than adequate quality for what you're requiring. Quite adequately. It saves a lot of hassle later, it's all over the place. But if you're using a larger sheet and you want a really smooth surface, then this is the thing to do. And why? Because when you paint onto watercolour paper, the amount of wetness will cockle the watercolour paper. It will start to go all wavy. And use the artist's quality, that's absolutely vital. With any other paint you might get away with it, with acrylics, with oils, but with watercolour it's vital you use only artist's quality. Now once they're squeezed onto a palette and dried out, they're the same as the ones in the pans. So all I have to do to get these working again is simply to put a little bit of water on to soften them, and I'm working away. Oranges, roses, cobalt violets, the various greens and blues. everything there that I will want, but I'll go into those colours as we go along. In more depth it's in my watercolour film, but in this one we're not going to need all of these colours, just a few of them. I can keep all of my various colours in sequence, so if I want cooler yellows or warmer yellows, if I want cooler reds or warmer reds, if I want cooler blues or warmer blues, I've got them there together going around in a colour circle almost. To help you see these colours more clearly and possibly buy them for yourself, here's a chart of the basic colours that I think are necessary. Of course there are far more than this, but if you have this amount you'll find you can do almost anything. Remember, most of these colours are vital. Many colours cannot be mixed, such as the cobalt violet and so on, so you do need to have them ready-made in tubes. Now, what other materials am I going to need? Well, I will be using some drawing gum for this. This is a Pabio one, and it's a blue drawing gum. I prefer the blue drawing gum because I can see where it's gone on the white paper afterwards. This is called masking fluid, basically, and it's a rubber solution which we can place onto the areas of paper where we don't want the paint to go, and we can rub it off later and then repaint those or tint those in. Gives a nice sharp line and great for textures, and we're definitely going to be using it for the highlights in so much of this wooden carving in the Beverley Minster scene. Now, there seems an awful lot of brushes here. You'll also notice sponges. These sea sponges are very good for doing textural work on leaves or beaches. I've got a little tube of white gouache for retouching white areas. If I do go over where I don't want to go and put a bit of white back in again, I could also use a bit of pastel for that. For my basic drawing I have my pencil and rubbers, and you'll see a plethora of brushes here, ranging from toothbrushes here through to oval mops, to round brushes, to fans, to sword brushes, to hake brushes, to flats, and even ones with serrated edges there, look. Now, all of these brushes are for different purposes, and unlike oil painting where I might only need 5 or 6 brushes, I use mainly filberts and rounds, and the same for acrylics. For watercolours with so many different effects and textures to get, I find that I need a series of brushes. It's not like a fisherman who has 100 floats but only has 2 favourites. Although I might only use 2 brushes, I could get away with just the oval mop, which leads the eye into this picture. And the next stage will be to start putting in some of the brighter colours and removing the masking fluid, because we're at the stage now where we can actually remove that masking fluid. Before I do the masking fluid, I'm just going to take a bit of scarlet and put in some of the red on the edges of the pews here. I might take it down a bit yet because it's going to be a bit too bright like it is, but just to start things off, some of this will be a bit lighter, and the masking fluid has to come off some of these areas too. canvas down off my easel and I'm going to start using the acrylics. I'm mixing at the moment some white emulsion with the acrylic and I'm going to pour areas and scrape them around and top some of these out a bit onto the board. We're at the closing stages of this now and we're looking at these birds, which I don't want to make too much of. Just want to give a hint of them, an illusion of them. But we've got to place them as an abstract, just in the right positions of where we want these little bits of colour and light to come. Between the abstract and the figurative.